Back at his house, Jae Moon's eyes swept the living room, trying to look for any sign of his lover. The notion crossed his mind that perhaps Yeon was hurrying to reach the bathroom, hence the mess. Jae Moon walked towards the bathroom, playfully calling Yeon's name and asking him if he was there. However, when he opened the bathroom, no one was around at all. He ended up searching for Yeon in their home gym, upstairs, and in every nook and cranny of his home. With each empty room, the mounting worry weighed heavily on him, and that intensified the sense of dread that gripped his head. Racking his brain for any possible answers for Yeon's absence, Jae Moon was still sure that Yeon had agreed to stay at home. At that precise moment, an unidentified caller attempted to contact him via a video call. Jae Moon's brows furrowed in utter confusion as he wondered who was trying to call him but tapped to accept the call anyway. Jae Moon's heart dropped into his stomach, a wave of panic washing over him as he witnessed Yeon appear unconscious on the video call. With a nefarious intent in their voice, someone on the other end declared that they didn't want to prolong the conversation and sternly instructed Jae Moon to check his mailbox immediately. They told him to follow their demands and avoid involving the police as those would be crucial for determining Yeon's and their children's safety. Without waiting for Jae Moon's reply, the unknown caller dropped the call, and all Jae Moon could do was fixate on the stunned expression staring back at him from his phone screen. "Don't be a coward and show your face, caller." However, that was only for a short moment. Jae Moon's anger radiated so strongly that his intense pheromones swirled around him as he urgently tapped on his phone and got on a call with someone else. He asked the person on the phone if he was speaking with the security office and if they would consider doing him a favor. Jae Moon's intense eyes burned with anger, half of his face cast an ominous shadow. In the security office, Jae Moon was hunched over behind a security guard, viewing the recordings from CCTV cameras. Jae Moon pointed at one of the screens, which was dedicated to camera 04. The alpha asked the security guard if he could zoom in on a particular car and its number plate. Jae Moon explained that it was the car that his partner was riding in. Though confused, the security guard willingly zoomed in while expressing disbelief that such an incident could occur in their complex. The screen showed a clear enough shot of the number plate, 152D03092. As his stare bore through the screen, Jae Moon's veins pulsated noticeably on the side of his head, and his pheromones swirled out of control once more. He took note of the number plate and thanked the security guard for helping him out. He advised the security guard not to get the police involved because he could handle this situation himself. Is this safe for him to be doing this alone? Immediately after leaving the security office, Jae Moon contacted someone named Jae Kyung, seeking assistance tracking a car's license plate to determine its current location. Jae Kyung was left bewildered by the abrupt request. Settled into his car, Jae Moon fastened his seatbelt with frustration evident on his face. He swore at the person responsible for taking his lover away from him from his own home. While driving down the road, he used his phone to call someone he knew he could trust. Jae Moon directed Secretary Kang to gather people at the specific location and he would send immediately. Without hesitating, Secretary Kang accepted the task at hand. Jae Moon sped up. He couldn't think of wasting even a second being away from Yeon. Desperation fills Jae Moon as he anxiously prays for Yeon's safety and hopes he is unharmed. In a dark room with a single light source beaming directly at his face, Yeon gradually woke up. His vision was blurry, but he could clearly see that he was tied up to a chair. A voice coming from the same room as Yeon asked if he was finally awake since they were getting worried that something had gone wrong. "Gee, I wonder what's wrong. Maybe the part where you kidnapped an innocent man." Yeon struggled to adapt his eyes beyond the radiant light. However, he could see a face emerge from the shadows, though he couldn't recognize the person he was seeing. Fully realizing the situation, Yeon sprang awake in a panic, his body tensing as he battled against his restraints. Despite not knowing their intentions, he exclaimed to the kidnapper that he didn't have any money. The kidnapper started laughing hysterically, answering that he didn't need money because he wanted something more valuable than that. The kidnapper moved closer to the Omega until he was right beside him, revealed to be Jungmyeon, Jae Moon's close friend. Placing a hand on Yeon's back, he explained that what he wants is not in the business of people like Yeon. Yeon is just there to serve as a means of trade for his true target, which he can only get by exchanging an incredibly expensive item. Target? The actual target should be your face, Jungmyeon. As he said all of these, he flashed a menacing grin that made the kind older brother demeanor that Yeon once knew him for seem like a lie. Strapped in his seat, Yeon could not bear to look at Jungmyeon's eyes and asked him why he was doing all of this. Jungmyeon whined that he found his current situation quite unfair and blamed another man for taking everything from him. He revealed that, in the past, this same guy was a junior that looked up to him. He was the type to always compliment Jung Myung, but Jung Myung only saw this as a form of insult. Jung Myung taught him everything he needed to know about their field of work, and this guy never forgot to thank Jung Myung for teaching him. However, Jung Myung doesn't feel like those words of gratitude were genuine. They were just more jabs of insults. Is this a glass half full, half empty scenario, Jung Myung? Jung Myung continues his spiel about how this guy is an opportunistic jerk who pretends to be innocent and naive. He wants Yeon to know that this guy is actually a monster who can hide his true colors pretty well. While he was blabbering, Jae Moon arrived at a sketchy location. When he got out, he was met with strangers with nothing but bad intent in their approach. As both anger and pheromones seeped out of him, Jae Moon started fighting. He was aggressive with his actions, trying to get rid of the people getting between him and his lover. I hope Jae Moon's in the right location. Jung Myung continued his tirade about finding out that this guy was such a monster that he practically gave his cousin a scar on the neck just to get the job he has now. Yeon has trouble understanding why Jung Myung is telling him all of this and asks if he has anything to do with the person Jung Myung is talking about. Jung Myung stood right in front of Yeon in order for the Omega to take a good look at his grin as he announced that this guy was none other than Yeon's future husband, Jae Moon. Yeon's eyes widened with surprise, his pupils dilating as he processed the information. He questions why Jung Myung is telling him all of this and demands to know what he wants from Jae Moon. Jung Myung didn't hesitate to convey his desire for the 3 jade sides, a heirloom that had been passed down through the generations in his family. He simply wishes to possess it. How is that even a guarantee they'll get a crowd? All this just to get back at someone who didn't even do you dirty. Petty. In a sudden realization, Yeon's heart dropped as he understood that the person he had been talking to all this time was someone he shared his experiences in New York with, Choi Jung Myung. Yeon was stunned and subduedly uttering his name when he was interrupted by Jae Moon, who entered the scene and aggressively cried out Jung Myung's name. Filling in the room with his pheromones, Jae Moon quickly approached his old friend, who was too stunned to move. Jung Myung didn't understand how Jae Moon could possibly find them. Since he just stood there, he was an easy target for Jae Moon to hit. Jung Myung received a hit on his face, directly causing most of the damage to his nose and eyes. Jae Moon continued to beat him, but he didn't forget why he came there in the first place. He immediately knelt in front of Yeon and held his face between his hands. Jae Moon apologized profusely because Yeon must have been scared alone, and he couldn't come fast enough. The alpha worriedly asked Yeon if he waited for him all this time. Yeon reassured him that he was fine and expressed his concern about seeing Jae Moon's wounds, particularly his bleeding hands. Knowing how worried Jae Moon was, I don't know if that's his. Slowly moving in the shadows, Jung Myung was plotting his immediate revenge on the alpha. He grabbed an item near him and gradually got himself up. Yeon held Jae Moon in a tight embrace, checking if he had come alone and showing genuine concern by asking about any pain or injuries elsewhere in his body. As the Omega was immersed in his reunion with his lover, his focus shifted abruptly when he remembered his surroundings, catching sight of Jung Myung preparing to strike Jae Moon with a wooden plank. Jae Moon, watch out. Yeon screamed Jae Moon's name in an attempt to warn the latter. However, it was too late. Jung Myung had struck Jae Moon on the back of his head. The blow was so great that Jae Moon teared up as he fell unconscious on the floor, bleeding from his head. Yeon cried in despair as the alpha slowly lost his vision. He cradled Jae Moon in his arms, weeping and didn't care if he was stained with the alpha's blood. He held their faces together and begged Jae Moon not to close his eyes. Voices and footsteps could be heard approaching the room. Jung Myung was so frustrated at the moment that he thought one of the guards he hired was trying to reach him. He was prepared to talk to one of the goons until he was met face-to-face with Secretary Kang. Secretary Kang didn't hesitate about what to do with Jung Myung. Like a good friend, Secretary Kang is there. With his face already in disarray, Secretary Kang accentuated his problem by delivering an immediate kick to Jung Myung's face. The police officers who simply accompanied the secretary couldn't believe that someone like him could deliver a blow that dire. Secretary Kang didn't involve himself with Jung Myung any further. When he saw the president bleeding in Yeon's arms, he couldn't help but kneel by his side. Yeon was crying uncontrollably as Secretary Kang noted that Jae Moon was bleeding way too much. They can't wait for an ambulance because they are slowly losing him. He ordered the people around to bring the car and go to the hospital quickly. While the police were arresting Jung Myung, Jae Moon couldn't help but process what was happening to him at the moment. He could see Yeon crying, and he could see the worried look on Secretary Kang. He could barely hear them. His head was hurting too much for him to concentrate on what they were trying to say. The next thing he knew, he was in a moving car. Yeon was right above him, his face still etched with worry. His hands were bloodied as he held on to Jae Moon's hand. When he woke again, Jae Moon found himself in the hospital, in a bed, being rushed somewhere. He could see people in scrubs yelling for a blood transfusion. Yeon was still crying by his side. In the next moment, he couldn't open his eyes but could hear the people around him. Someone had asked why he wasn't waking up, and someone else answered that he was unconscious, as if he was in a deep sleep. When asked how long he'll be unconscious, the answer was not pleasant to hear. He may regain consciousness after a minimum of a month or at most around a year. Jae Moon, please wake up soon. Yeon and your kids need you. As Jae Moon succumbed to unconsciousness, the echoes of a distant voice gently called out his name and reached him in the realm of dreams. Jae Moon jolted awake, a palpable shock coursing through him. Embraced by a sweet aroma wafting through the air, he experienced a gentle touch gracing his cheek. The tender touch on his cheek welcomed him into the presence of someone adorned in a hanbok with flowing brown locks. This person was visibly worried for Jae Moon since he was sweating a lot when he was asleep. This was the majestic figure of Jae Moon, entwined in a romantic embrace with his beloved, the loyal soldier Ji Yeon. Jae Moon was relieved that what he had experienced was a dream, and now, here he was in the waking world. Ji Yeon is so vivid and real. Which one is the dream now? Are we jumping through time, or is Jae Moon having a lucid dream? Lovingly, Jae Moon clasped Ji Yeon's hand against his cheek, immersed in the adoration he felt for the soldier. However, the dream he just had felt bitter and painful. It's like he was still there and living in that cruel place. In a weary tone, Jae Moon recounted a night of troubled sleep, haunted by a dream where he almost lost something precious and faced betrayal. They were amidst the serene landscape where a scattering of birds was perched on the towering trees. Enormous trees enveloped the couple, and a gentle waterfall cascaded nearby with soothing sounds complementing the picturesque scene. Jae Moon and Ji Yeon found a tranquil perch on sturdy rocks as they engaged in conversation. Ji Yeon was curious and asked Jae Moon what that precious item was. Jae Moon confessed that the most precious thing for him would be Ji Yeon himself. Ji Yeon found himself blushing uncontrollably at the prince's words. Jae Moon sweetly emphasized that there was no one else who could captivate his heart as deeply as Ji Yeon. Just as Jae Moon confessed, he leaned forward for a kiss. They held hands as they enjoyed this moment together. With their hands still intertwined, Ji Yeon asked Jae Moon if the queen was feeling any better. He expressed his worry over the palace being way too quiet lately, so he felt like something was bound to happen. Ji Yeon doesn't just look out for his lover. Jae Moon pointed out that Ji Yeon has been worrying about a lot of things lately. He admitted that he was also troubled about his mother's health, so he's staying informed about the latest updates on her condition. Unfortunately, it looks like there's no sign of her recovering, even with the treatments. Jae Moon confessed that he visited the queen this morning and saw that she didn't look well, which made him feel like there was a missing piece of a puzzle. Something just fell off for him. As he watched his mother's worsening health, Jae Moon became increasingly concerned about how his father would handle the situation. Ji Yeon squeezed Jae Moon's hand and reassured him that he shouldn't worry, prompting Jae Moon to gaze into Ji Yeon's eyes. Ji Yeon responded with a warm smile and promised that he'd be by his side no matter what, protecting him and the royal palace until the day Jae Moon revived the country. Jae Moon felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for having Ji Yeon by his side. He couldn't help but reflect on how much strength and comfort Ji Yeon had brought into his life. He feels so much at ease and happy with Ji Yeon right by his side. The wind gently stirred in Jae Moon's hospital room, rustling the curtains as he lay in peaceful repose. Yeon, by his side, couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness in the face of the situation. Yeon placed his hand over Jae Moon's and tried to call his name. Stress is not good for the babies. Jae Moon, please wake up. In a quaint setting, a young man meticulously arranged vibrant and beautiful flowers with artistic precision. As he immersed himself in his floral creation, his name was uttered out loud as Young Min. Red eyes and brown hair, is this younger Young Min? Another young man wearing a blue hoodie approached him and appreciated the artistry before him. With an innocent smile on his face, he told Young Min that he wanted to make a pretty flower arrangement too. Young Min pointed him in the direction of the materials so that he could arrange flowers himself this time. While Young Min expertly enhanced his flower arrangement, the young man in the hoodie attempted his own creation. This young man's arrangement appeared simplistic and lacked the finesse that really showed that it was the work of a complete beginner. Despite Young Min's concern about the wasted flowers, the adults only complimented this novice's effort. Young Min felt deeply hurt and couldn't rid himself of the sentiment that Jae Moon, the beginner, was receiving far more compliments than him. In fact, to add salt to injury, Young Min was only complimented because the adults thought he was trying to follow in Jae Moon's footsteps. Everything began with that moment. With the notebook taking center stage as the focal point, a sleek mechanical pen resting beside it, and open notes. Young Min's desk as a student was organized and gave off obvious signs that he was studious. Young Min asked Jae Moon what he wanted to do after they graduated from school. Jae Moon was lying down on a couch near him, wanting to take a break after reading. Opening one eye to look at his cousin, Jae Moon said he didn't want to follow his dad in the restaurant business and expressed his desire to establish his name in the art industry. Equally curious, he turned the question to Young Min. Without turning from his desk, Young Min remembered his parents. He argues with them often, but with a lot of heavy thinking. He places on paper that he wants to support his family in the future. Young Min is really soft here. He didn't pick fights at all, nor was he plotting anything mischievous. Young Min was born as the only son of a distinguished family, but it didn't allow him to escape being overshadowed by Jae Moon, which started when they were young. In another part of Young Min's childhood, he remembers a particular memory. He was once held down and couldn't move. An alpha's pheromones and this person's strength were holding him down. Young Min couldn't do anything but cry and beg for someone to help him. He really thought this was it for him. Get your filthy hands off of Young Min. Someone, please call the police or something. Despite having this painful memory stuck in his head, it's prominently placed there because what unfolded afterward significantly eased his journey through life, offering a glimmer of hope and promise. In a sudden turn of events, a tall stranger intervened and yanked the vile individual away from Young Min. This is God, a guardian angel. Once Young Min had a bit of distance away from this vile person, the stranger posed a rhetorical question, questioning the rationale behind mistreating an innocent soul. Despite the pleas and empty promises of this vile person, they were met with skepticism. Fueled by anger and disgust, the stranger unleashed a series of forceful blows, delivering a form of retribution for the despicable behavior. Meanwhile, Young Min shifted in and out of consciousness. However, he couldn't help but remember the distinctive smell coming from the stranger. Young Min was curious about the owner of the scent, but he couldn't see his face at all. It's a really sweet scent that usually belongs to hombres, but clearly, this stranger was physically strong enough to fight with the alpha that assaulted Young Min. Young Min slumped down and hit his head on the floor. Just as he did, the stranger went to his aid and frantically asked if he was all right. In the midst of life's chaos, that subtle scent became his lifesaver, a whisper of comfort that gently cradled his spirit. Until now, Young Min kept looking for the person who saved his life. Who could it be? As adults, Jae Moon and Young Min revisited an old topic from their student days. Young Min said that he had discovered his calling, which was to become a perfumer. Though this seems like a light topic, Young Min's whole demeanor was menacing, especially with one hand behind his back and the other helping him lean against a desk. Jae Moon didn't think anything of it and was more than happy to hear that Young Min had a goal in life. He guessed that Young Min had been thinking about it a lot lately. As they talked, the box cutter from behind Young Min slid in and out of its container with the help of Young Min's thumb. Young Min announced that he was facing a huge hurdle at the moment and he needed Jae Moon's help to help him solve the problem. Jae Moon eagerly inquired about the ways he could actively contribute to helping Young Min pursue his dream. Despite having a wide smile on his face, Young Min was crying as he placed the cutter near his neck and asked Jae Moon if he was really willing to help him. Whoa, that took a turn of events. All color drained from Jae Moon's face as he was suddenly thrust into a serious situation. Witnessing his cousin in distress and engaging in actions that could profoundly impact his life, Jae Moon couldn't help but hastily approach him. However, Jae Moon couldn't do anything to help. Young Min had already harmed himself. Even if he was bleeding profusely, he had a big smile on his face as if he won. Jae Moon was too stunned to move. The accursed weapon was left on the floor as Young Min held his open wound with his hand and yelled for someone to save him. Adults came rushing in after hearing the cry for help. The scene in which they came in was not a pretty one. Young Min was on the floor bleeding while Jae Moon was hovering over him and not doing anything. Everyone rushed to call for an ambulance, while others went directly to Young Min's side. Young Min took this as an opportunity to say that Jae Moon did this to him. This son of a monkey, what's wrong with you? Young Min, we were all rooting for you. The adults turned to Jae Moon as Young Min claimed that Jae Moon did this to him all because the latter had dreams of his own and didn't want to work with someone like Young Min. He artfully spun a deceitful narrative, claiming loyalty to Jae Moon's side and expressing a desire to assist him in every way possible. He painted Jae Moon as selfish and wanted Young Min out of the picture. He gave those as the reasons why Jae Moon placed a knife near his neck. They're all rich. They should have CCTVs there, right? Justice for Jae Moon. Jae Moon's father approached him from behind, placed both hands on his son's shoulders, and genuinely asked if he did all of that to Young Min. However, Jae Moon was left traumatized by the unfolding events. His eyes widened in shock, tears streamed down his face uncontrollably, and his entire body trembled. All he could manage to say was stuttering and repeated apologies. Under the weight of overwhelming desperation, Young Min's actions escalated to the point where he felt compelled to go to extreme lengths to find his savior. In the hospital, Young Min recreated the flower arrangement he crafted years ago and tenderly arranged them by Jae Moon's bedside. It took him years, but he realized how stupid Jae Moon was just accepting a fall like that for him. He didn't feel like winning seeing his cousin on the hospital bed in this condition. Young Min compared Jae Moon to the children's story, The Giving Tree. He doesn't like the idea that Jae Moon is the one who has to suffer because he's being too generous to a fault. The Giving Tree is a story about an apple tree and a little boy. The tree showers the boy with everything, yet as he grows, he demands more. The tree, selflessly, never seeks anything in return. Young Min is weighed down by the heavy burden of remorse. He asks when his cousin is going to wake up, stressing that today is supposed to be Jae Moon's wedding day. Young Min places his hand over Jae Moon's and encourages him to wake up so he can accept his apology and witness the birth of his children. The creaking wooden door slid open, and Ji Yeon walked in. He was taken aback to find Young Min being beside his cousin. Young Min offered a sincere apology to Ji Yeon for meeting each other in a situation like this, especially when their last meetup didn't end too well. Who was this person? Is this really Young Min? Now visibly showing a bump, Ji Yeon gently rested a hand on his stomach. He stood next to Young Min and reassured him that everything was fine between them. Young Min couldn't help but stare at Ji Yeon's stomach. He was a bit concerned seeing how Ji Yeon was sporting a small bump but was carrying twins, making it even harder for the Omega. He was in his 5th month. Out of the blue, Ji Yeon asked Young Min if he could have dinner with him later, and Young Min gladly accepted the offer. The hospital cafeteria was quiet, with many empty seats, few guests, and flawlessly pristine surfaces. Ji Yeon stirred the steaming hot soup, adding a vibrant touch to the savory aroma wafting through the air. Young Min opened up the conversation first by mentioning how Ji Yeon was going to become a mother soon and asked if Ji Yeon had been able to rest well lately. Ji Yeon smiled and said that he was fine, mostly because his mother-in-law had prepared a nice bed for him in the hospital. Now he feels comfortable staying next to Jae Moon, and he doesn't have to rest somewhere else all alone. It's really good to know that there are people looking out for Ji Yeon. Witnessing Ji Yeon's pregnant state and realizing the absence of his alpha to protect him during such vulnerable times, Young Min was overwhelmed with guilt for how he had treated Ji Yeon before. Ji Yeon asked Young Min until when he would be in Korea. Young Min explained that he returned when he caught wind that Jae Moon's gallery became a mess because of the alpha's absence, so he is planning on staying in Korea for at least 4 months since Jae Moon's dad asked him for some help. As the conversation shifted toward Jae Moon's absence, a somber atmosphere enveloped Young Min and Ji Yeon, and heavy silence settled between them. Young Min looked outside the hospital windows as Ji Yeon continued eating. A towering tree danced gracefully in the breeze, its branches swaying rhythmically as the leaves took flight and were carried away by the whimsical currents of the wind. Concerns for Jae Moon filled Young Min's thoughts. Beneath the tree, Prince Jae Moon sensed an unusual shift in the wind. Will the change in the wind stir him awake, or will this lead him to dwell more in this reality? While Prince Jae Moon felt the wind's caress, Ji Yeon drew near astride his steed. He got off his horse, stood in front of Jae Moon with a deep bow, and asked the prince to go back to the palace to avoid getting the cold. Jae Moon didn't hesitate to follow his lover's words. However, just as the lovers were preparing to make their way back to the palace, they were intercepted by another soldier atop a swiftly charging horse. This messenger shouted urgently, proclaiming he had pressing news that demanded the prince's immediate attention. With an authoritative expression on his face, Ji Yeon drew his sword and walked forward in order to tell the messenger that he should address the news to him first and not get a step closer to the prince. The messenger did as he was told and whispered the news to Ji Yeon's ear. The information left Ji Yeon in disbelief. Initially turbulent, the wind began to escalate into a full-fledged storm as Ji Yeon steadily approached Jae Moon. With a serious expression, Jae Moon awaited the news and was unable to discern what it could be. Tears streamed down Jae Moon's face, his body convulsing with grief as the weight of the news of his mother's death brought a profound ache to his chest. The rain poured down in a relentless symphony, and their surroundings were cloaked in darkness. They sought comfort in each other's embrace, and their tears persisted, blending seamlessly with the falling raindrops. At least they had each other. The rain accompanied the lovers on their trip back to the palace, and a sense of melancholy surrounded the entire area. Cloaked in pristine white attire, they entered a grand library surrounded by towering shelves laden with books. Jae Moon was talking to one of his mother's help. Though grieving and frustrated, Jae Moon didn't raise his voice to the help. He simply demanded answers as to why his mother passed away, especially when she was healthy before. None of that made sense for the prince. The help bowed deeply and promised that he had thoroughly investigated the matter, but couldn't come up with any answers. Something smells fishy here. Jae Moon refrained from pressing the matter further, understanding that the answer wouldn't unveil itself willingly. Ji Yeon was getting worried about him when Jae Moon announced that he had to talk to his father about this. The rain continued throughout the night and intensified into a heavier downpour. Jae Moon reached his father's door, even if he was an heir to the throne. Jae Moon still needed to request entry to see his own father. When he was permitted to enter, the room was filled with overpowering pheromones. As moments passed in his father's room, a nagging feeling of unease began to creep over him. His father ordered him to go back. Jae Moon took a moment to absorb the words spoken to him and the sight he was seeing. There was something that didn't quite add up. Yet, rather than confronting his father or seeking answers, Jae Moon chose to let it be and turned his attention elsewhere. Joseon's sun began to dim after the queen's death. Jae Moon couldn't help but notice that his father seemed to place his trust in individuals other than himself. It was evident that these chosen confidants had ulterior motives. Over time, people's view of their rules started to get worse. The disagreements among government officials became more serious, making the situation even messier than before. In the room specially designed for the officials to conduct their duties and hold important meetings, men argue amongst themselves. The seating arrangement in the room followed a hierarchical structure, with the highest-ranking official typically sitting at the head of the table and lower-ranking officials seated farther away from the highest-ranking official. One of the lower-ranking officials expressed their frustration, exclaiming how the king could allow people to perish in such a manner. They further criticized the king for neglecting his responsibilities, particularly in the aftermath of the queen's death. The other officials began to ridicule the individual, cautioning them to be mindful of their words. While the commotion had yet to settle down, the other officials conversed among themselves about different issues surrounding the kingdom, such as the embankment around the provinces not being properly inspected, which would increase the damages caused by the impending downpour of rain. The highest-ranking official in the room spoke, and everyone stopped to listen to what he had to say. With a heavy and serious expression, he stated that their people should not leave the situation as it is. They have not only transformed their wise king, but also the people. They must return to their previous state. Meanwhile, in the other parts of the kingdom, the prince was target practicing with his bow and arrow in a field. A lot of thoughts were running around in his head. With Ji Yeon right behind him to listen, Jae Moon eventually puts down his bow and expresses his concern regarding the change he sees in his father. He just lost his mother, and now he has to worry about his father, too. Why does he have to go through so much? He is worried that his relationship with his father will never go back to how it was. Concerned, Ji Yeon asked the prince how he could be so certain about that. Jae Moon stated that his father's refusal to make eye contact with him was obvious. Jae Moon stood in a calculated stance as he aimed the bow and arrow, ensuring his form was aligned for optimal accuracy. However, his arrow missed the target. Jae Moon lowered his bow as his gaze was fixed on nothing in particular, lost in a somber contemplation. Overwhelmed by self-disappointment, Jae Moon found it difficult to reconcile with the idea that he was contemplating rebellion against his own father and wrestled with the inner turmoil of feeling like an ungrateful son. It hurts him to know that he'll betray the same person who once looked at him with love and gave him encouraging words as a child. Ji Yeon approached the prince with a pledge of unwavering loyalty, assuring him that he would stay the same, forever unchanging. And until now, those words are etched into Yeon's words. He wiped away the tears from the prince's face and promised him he would always be by his side to protect him. The prince leaned into the gentle touch, securing Ji Yeon's wrist as tears continued to flow. Following the solemn promise, Ji Yeon stood steadfastly before the prince, urging him to wipe away his tears. Jae Moon expressed his gratitude for Ji Yeon's presence, feeling a profound sense of reassurance as if he wouldn't have made it through without him by his side. Smiling, Yeon wished for the prince's health and happiness and expressed his hope that everything would turn out fine for them. At a distance, a menacing figure cast a sidelong glance, wearing a wicked smile as they warned the prince not to let his guard down. Who is this person? Is this the same person responsible for the queen's fate? What is he planning to do with the prince? A downpour of rain cascaded from the sky, causing the embankment to crumble, and massive bodies of water surged into the village. The village was submerged in the rising floodwaters. Families faced the devastating loss of loved ones, and the fields of crops were mercilessly torn apart by the relentless deluge. The village stood inundated, a somber testament to the destructive force of nature. In stark contrast, the palace remained dry and sheltered from the ravages of the relentless storm. Inside the palace, the king's face contorted with anger as he furiously read the news from the scrolls. Frustrated, he flung the scroll inches away from the bowing official who had presented it to him. The king's fury intensified, and he vehemently declared that he had no desire to be lectured on how to govern his own kingdom. The official, who had been bowing and on his knees for a while now, continued to avoid the king's eyes by bowing low. He implored the king to lend him his ear, begging him to enhance the well-being of their people and enforce greater discipline throughout the nation. With a disdainful gaze, the king regarded the official as he spoke, taking offense at the implication that someone would dare to correct him. With an air of superiority, the king believed in his divine right to rule and perceived the official as presumptuous who thought too highly of themselves. The king firmly ordered for this official to be dragged out of his sight and to call someone else. Despite being forcibly removed and subjected to humiliation by the king, the official continued to raise his voice, fervently pleading for the king to understand his perspective. With the official out of the picture, the king clutched his head as he felt a throbbing sensation pulsating through his temples. The government official he called for arrived and greeted him. The king wore a sickly expression, his eyes drooping and face turned pale. He continued clutching his head as he spoke to the government official, asking the latter about the condition of the village. The government official bowed his head low and reported that the king didn't have a lot to worry about. Not a lot. Hello, there were a lot of tragedies down below. The government official explained that he had already issued orders for the government to address the damage done to the village. The king then noted that he couldn't see any light at the crown prince's palace and asserted that he was content with the current state of affairs. The government official praised the king and stated that the king was the brightest sun in Joseon, and that the idea of having two suns in the sky was ridiculous. The absence of the sun cast a dreary atmosphere over the village. The weather was bleak, a sky painted in shades of gray. Soldiers distributed servings of soup. Clad in dirty and torn clothes, the villagers wore somber expressions as they formed a line to get their fillings. Their faces reflected the seriousness and despair that hung in the air. The soup provided to the villagers was tasteless and lacking in substance. The villagers felt let down by the bland soup, but they couldn't complain because where else could they get food? A sudden shout about the arrival of porridge startled some villagers. All eyes turned towards the source of excitement, discovering another villager receiving a warm bowl of porridge adorned with toppings. In stark contrast to the bland soup, the porridge appeared radiant and almost glistening, as if it held a subtle sparkle in its presence. Yeon and his brother were the ones serving the food to some of the villagers. Breath of fresh air, seeing the siblings in their purple outsides just gives life to the scene, metaphorically and quite literally, for the villagers. As the villager bowed their head low, they cradled the warm bowl of porridge in their hands and profoundly expressed their thanks. Ji Yeon couldn't hide his disappointment as he witnessed the villagers receiving only bland soup from the government after enduring 2 days of hunger due to the flood. To add to Ji Yeon's disappointment, his brother stated that this type of act is happening all over the country. The government officials seem more preoccupied with satisfying their own appetites than addressing the needs of the people right in front of them. Ji Yeon's spirits sank as he witnessed the swift deterioration of their country. He watched children happily singing about the king filling their stomachs when, in reality, this isn't how a king should show compassion. He strongly believed that those the government and the king should be serving were the individuals being grievously mistreated. If only there were more people as compassionate as you, Ji Yeon. The king lay on his bed. His sickly demeanor contrasted sharply with the fiery resentment in his eyes. Despite his feeble state, he summoned enough energy to launch a punch at the table in front of him. The king was furious about the rumors going around about him being slow. The government official he entrusted to cater to the villagers was in front of him again. He bowed low and asked the king what he wanted to do to resolve his anger. The king's brows continued to furrow, all because of the notion that the Ji family might be looking down on him. The government official adopted a facade of surprise and asserted that he couldn't fathom the idea that the crown prince and Ji Yeon from the Ji family would engage in something like this against the king. The government official was happy to hear that the king would finally do something about the Ji family. After the government official mentioned the prince's title, the king heaved a deep sigh and covered his face with his hand. He couldn't fathom that his own son would do something like this and felt that bringing up a son like him would bring disappointment to the royal name. On that note, The deity would like to disagree, but sure, go on. Wearing a menacing grin, the government official declared that he had a proposal for the king. Instead of finding anything suspicious with the official's sudden change of mood, the king was excited to hear what he had to say. Someone, please send a 21st century slipper and hit these two. What is this official planning to do with our sweet couple? On a new day, the government official gathered a group of soldiers. Positioned with purpose, he conveyed the king's message to the assembled men, instructing them to stand down as the prince's manifestation was set to commence shortly. In a display of disciplined respect, the soldiers bowed their heads in unison and acknowledged the order. The moment the soldiers walked away from him, the government official gradually walked towards the open sky and looked up. He had a smile on his face and talked to himself as if he was talking to the prince. The government official asserts that the prince's past recklessness was imprudent. However, now that he has exhausted his freedom, it is time for him to face the consequences of his heedlessness, as he is on the brink of being branded a traitor. The prince lay on his bed with eyes tightly shut and a grimace etched across his face, expressing the discomfort rippling through his body. The room witnessed the profound pain and emanation of an assertive scent as he endured the manifestation of his second gender. Please stay safe, Your Highness. The rain descended in a torrential cascade upon the palace, the heavy drops drumming relentlessly on its grand structure. Despite the tempest outside, inside the palace, Jae Moon resisted the call to stay still. His determination was palpable as he fervently insisted on dressing himself and leaving. Pleading and exerting their utmost effort, the servants attempted to stop him, but Jae Moon remained impervious to their appeals. One of the servants conveyed to Jae Moon that the king had issued an order for him to remain inside. In response, a surge of anger swept over Jae Moon, and he raised his voice, demanding all the servants to leave his presence immediately. The tension in the air escalated as the prince quickly walked away from them. Jae Moon's recollection was vivid, etched with the memory of his father sternly giving orders, forbidding him from leaving the palace as a disciplinary measure. Within the fabric of his memories, another strand unfolded, a memory featuring Ji Yeon with tears cascading down his face, recognizing the possibility that he might never see his beloved again. Fueled by his alpha instincts and enveloped in the scent of his own pheromones, Jae Moon's determination surged within him to see Ji Yeon immediately. Despite the rain, Jae Moon departed the palace with a determined stride, leaving behind pleading servants urging his return. Unbeknownst to him, in the shadows lurked the government official who had insidiously planted the seed of thought in the king's mind. Observing Jae Moon defy the imposed restrictions, the government official couldn't hide a sinister satisfaction, reveling in the fulfillment of a plan that aimed to draw in chaos within the palace. This couldn't count as treachery, right? How can the prince return to the palace if it is? The prince walked purposefully toward the grand doors of the palace, each step bringing him closer to the barrier that stood between him and his beloved Ji Yeon. During a heavy downpour, the prince stood completely soaked, his pheromones lingering in the rain-soaked air. Exhausted, he wearily banged on Ji Yeon's window and called his name. Ji Yeon opened his windows, taken aback to find the prince making an unexpected visit. He expressed his concern, noting the prince's drenched appearance. The prince's only response was his desire to enter Ji Yeon's home. In the sweet reunion, their hearts ached with the longing they had endured. As they finally embraced, their arms wrapped around each other in a tight and tender hold, creating a sanctuary where the world outside faded away. The prince's heart was brimmed with affection. He spoke words that danced on the edge of vulnerability, revealing the depths of his emotions and adoration for the Omega. Ji Yeon requested that the prince spread his love in him, so Jae Moon freely released his affection without any restraints. Following their tender embrace, the persistent rain ceased. The skies transitioned into a brilliant shade of blue as its warm rays pierced through the dissipating clouds. It was as if nature itself had mirrored the lovers' union. Ji Yeon eagerly shared the joyous news that the rain had finally come to an end. The prince was swept up in the infectious happiness and showered Ji Yeon with affectionate kisses. The air was filled not only with the warmth of the sun, but also with the shared bliss of the couple. A somber shift enveloped Ji Yeon as the realization dawned that his brother and father were called to the palace and hadn't returned yet. Upon hearing this, Jae Moon swiftly rose from the bed, his face etched with concern. He inquired if Ji Yeon's father and brother were summoned to the palace by the king, as he desperately hoped that this unsettling revelation wasn't true. Oh, something feels remarkably off. Puzzled by Jae Moon's reaction, Ji Yeon inquired about the source of his distress and asked if official Kwon had something to do with his sudden change of mood. The color seemed to drain from Jae Moon's face, leaving behind an ashen hue as the gravity of his actions sank in after he had inadvertently put two innocent men in the path of the king's discipline. Jae Moon couldn't believe he had unintentionally given official Kwon, the government official working closely with the king, a reason to label Ji Yeon's family as traitors. As they speak, Ji Yeon's brother and father stand in front of the king and official Kwon. In the center of the field, both are vulnerable and unprotected. This is all just a power trip. However, I genuinely hope it won't result in something too drastic. In the open field, a palpable tension hung thick in the air as Ji Yeon's brother and father stood exposed. Atop a looming staircase, the king and official Kwon cast an imposing gaze downward, their elevated position adding an element of authority to the charged atmosphere below. Official Kwon wore a sinister grin, his anticipation evident as he eagerly awaited the moment to deliver the news. In stark contrast, Ji Yeon's brother stood with a glare. Official Kwon took a deliberate step forward, his eyes widening with a menacing intensity as he announced for the Ji family to heed their superiors. He proceeded, stating that not only had the Ji family tarnished the moral standing of the country's king by influencing public opinion, but they had also manipulated the crown prince in a treasonous plot. Consequently, the Ji family was charged with high treason. The king quietly labeled someone a high treason criminal. Hearing this, official Kwon solemnly announced Ji Yeon's fate, stating that the warrior guard of the crown prince was sentenced to a lethal punishment involving the consumption of poisonous food. Ji Yeon's family was startled by the announcement. Their faces turned pale, and tremors ran through their bodies. Both Ji Yeon's brother and father crumbled to the ground. Ji Yeon's brother sank to his knees, a gesture of submission and despair. Meanwhile, Ji Yeon's father, overcome with deep remorse, bowed profoundly, his hands and forehead touching the ground. Amidst this saddening display, the father's voice rang out, taking responsibility for Ji Yeon's actions and fervently declaring his willingness to bear the punishment in his son's stead. Can someone please save them? They don't deserve any of this. This is nothing but an abuse of power. Ji Yeon's brother simmered with anger, the intensity of his emotions vividly conveyed through his eyes, even as their father persisted in pleading and fervently volunteered to endure the punishment. It was evident to him that the stakes were higher than just his brother's life. The threat loomed over the entire Ji family, hinting at a sinister intention to obliterate their existence. The king leaned in, whispering confidentially to official Kwon. Upon hearing the king's words, an expression of unbridled satisfaction painted itself across official Kwon's face. "Wipe that smug look off your face, Kwon. No one wants to see that." Official Kwon happily declared that the Ji family must comply with the king's decree, subjecting them to banishment and being stripped of their authority, ultimately leading to the extermination of the Ji family. Ji Yeon's brother trembled uncontrollably, tears streaming down his face. The incredulity gripped him as he struggled to comprehend the heinous actions planned against their entire family. With a heavy heart, he denounced Kwon as an exceedingly wicked man. Yet, amidst the despair, a determined spark ignited within Ji Yeon's brother. An idea took root, which was a silent vow to one day claim Kwon's head as retribution for the injustice. With a seemingly compliant tone, Ji Yeon's brother declared their obedience to the king's order. However, his thoughts brewing within him, mirrored by a sinister smile, betrayed those words. Concealed behind the walls, one of the servants bore witness to the unfolding events. Amidst the commotion, he discerned the figure of his master, Hwa Young-hoon's lover, on the field. Fueled by unwavering loyalty, he hastily retreated from the scene, driven by the urgency to inform his master of the critical developments. "You're a good man. However, I wonder who this Hwa Young-hoon person is." In his room, a young man with red eyes and very light brown hair diligently attended to his tasks. Clad in a brown hanbok, he exuded an air of importance. Suddenly, the tranquility of his room was disrupted as one of his servants called his name repeatedly, sprinted from the outside, and urgently rushed into the room without waiting for permission. "So Hwa Young-hoon is Young Min but from the past." The servant dropped to the floor in front of the young man and bowed deeply while exclaiming that a problem had arisen. The young man was jolted by sheer surprise as the servant abruptly materialized before him, but gathered enough composure to ask what was the matter for him to be kicking such a fuss. In a tone filled with distress and urgency, the servant conveyed the recent decree. "The king has just ordered the extermination of the Ji family, and immediate exile awaits them." Hwa Young-hoon abruptly rose from his seat, his voice elevated in urgency as he sought confirmation and asked if what he had just heard was true. With a serious demeanor, the servant confirmed the truth of his statement, emphasizing that he could not fathom fabricating such a serious matter. As Hwa Moon grappled with the weight of the order, his thoughts spiraled into an overwrought contemplation of Jun, his lover, being unable to escape the impending doom. Jun, that's Secretary Kong's name in the past. Young Min and Secretary Kong are fated to be together. Despite the agony in his own heart, the specter of concern for the prince loomed large. He asked the servant if Jae Moon knew of this problem. Equally gripped by panic, the servant hastily revealed that information from the inner palace indicated that Jae Moon had departed at dawn. Therefore, it was certain that he remained unaware of the impending crisis. Deep in thought, Hwa Young-goon pondered the whereabouts of Jae Moon. He realized today was the peak of Jae Moon's manifestation, giving him an idea of where the latter could be. With a sense of urgency, Hwa Young-goon swiftly informed the servant that he believed he knew Jae Moon's whereabouts. He asked the servant to quickly prepare a horse for him, cautioning to be discreet and vigilant. The servant agreed to follow his instructions. Sneaking outside the palace walls and ready to leave with his horse, Hwa Young-goon promised his loyal servant that he'd be back soon. The servant kindly asked for him to be careful. Hwa Young-goon rode through the dense forest like an arrow. His face bore the weight of intense worry. Hwa Young-goon remarked that today's events were terrifying. The drastic measure of exterminating an entire family struck him as a perplexing act from the king, especially something so rash as this. Under the trees, Ji Yeon and Jae Moon found themselves in blissful oblivion to the currently unfolding turmoil. Jae Moon was burdened with duties back at the palace. He hesitated to part ways with Ji Yeon, reluctance evident in the depths of his eyes, but he knew he had to go. Sensing the weight in Jae Moon's heart, Ji Yeon gently reassured him that he wasn't going anywhere and encouraged the prince to secure victory safely. Racing against time, Hwa Young-goon managed to reach the couple, his urgent call slicing through the air until it successfully caught Jae Moon's attention. As Hwa Young-goon approached, Jae Moon was perplexed, questioning why Hwa Young-goon was outside the palace. The prince called him Hwan. That's an adorable nickname. Hwa Young-goon urgently informed Jae Moon that he must quickly return to the palace with him, disclosing that the high officials had decreed the exile and extermination of the Ji family. Shock registered on Jae Moon's face upon hearing the news, but his immediate concern shifted to Ji Yeon's reaction. He cast a worried glance at his lover, attempting to grasp his hand and softly calling his name. However, tense and resolute, Ji Yeon did not accept the offered hand. Instead, he clenched his fist. Ji Yeon uttered words of assurance, letting Jae Moon know that, despite the intense news, he was holding up fine. Though Ji Yeon's words carried reassurance, Jae Moon was finely tuned to his omega. He instinctively felt that Ji Yeon wasn't fully expressing his genuine emotions. However, he had to deal with something much bigger than both of them right now. Jae Moon positioned himself behind Hwa Young-goon on the horse, cradled Ji Yeon's face in his hands, and vowed that he would return to stand by his side, no matter the circumstances. Ji Yeon tenderly leaned into the prince's touch and made a heartfelt promise, pledging to stay alive at any cost and vowing to protect the place Jae Moon could return to. Jae Moon trusted Ji Yeon and acknowledged his words. Hwa Young-goon signaled the horse, urging it to gallop away with haste. As they distanced themselves, Jae Moon couldn't help but look back. Tears welled in his eyes, and his heart was heavy at the thought of leaving Ji Yeon alone. Ji Yeon stood solitary, his gaze fixed on the vanishing figures of Jae Moon and Hwa Young-goon as they disappeared into the forest. In a soft plea, he begged Jae Moon not to go, not to leave him alone in the encompassing emptiness. Overwhelmed by despair, Ji Yeon crumpled to the ground, tears streaming down his face. Despite his promise to Jae Moon, the weight of staying alive in the absence of his love proved too heavy to bear. Only darkness loomed at the end of the road, encapsulating the lover's desolation. "I'm ready to hunt some crusty old men. Jae Moon, win this for all the good people out there." Ji Yeon and Jun's father found himself confined behind cold bars. Following the king's orders, the Supreme Court descended and stripped the Ji family of all authority and confiscated their properties. Bound by ropes, they stood in a line. Their identities were reduced to a uniformity emphasized by their matching white clothes. The dehumanizing procession marked the beginning of their march, a solemn journey forced upon them due to the ruthless decree hanging over the entire Ji family. Regardless of gender or age, they were separated and traded as slaves. Like the rest of his family, Ji Yeon found himself ensnared in this bleak fate. Amidst the grim circumstances, a life that couldn't embrace blessings quietly stirred within him. Ji Yeon tenderly cradled his stomach. On this particular night, in a small house, Ji Yeon's hands were wrapped around his stomach. He initiated a tender conversation with the unborn child. He posed a poignant question. wondering if the little one longed for their father's absent warmth. Overcome with emotion, Ji Yeon admitted to the baby that he also profoundly missed him. The doors creaked open, revealing a man with a well-defined structure adorned in soiled clothes. Ji Yeon acknowledged the familiar figure as his brother. He asked Jun about the dirt on his attire and if something had happened. Jun methodically removed his soiled clothes, exchanging them for something clean. As he transformed his appearance, he nonchalantly shared the encounter with a noble man who obstructed his path home. With an air of casual indifference, Jun revealed that he contemplated severing the nobleman's head but ultimately settled for tossing the individual's lifeless body off a cliff. He turned around to look at his younger brother to see if something went wrong while he was away. The gravity of his words seemed to escape him. I mean, he was a soldier before this. Despite being a warrior before, Ji Yeon was shocked and with genuine concern, asked whether Jun had inflicted significant harm on this noble man. Jun playfully flicked Ji Yeon's forehead in his response. Wincing in pain, Ji Yeon instinctively covered his forehead and complained about how it hurt. Kneeling in front of his younger brother, Jun attributed the flick to be Ji Yeon's own fault for indulging in what he deemed as nonsensical talk. Jun admitted that despite the devastating extermination order that annihilated their entire family, they had managed to evade danger thus far, thanks to the protection of Old Man Cho. Jun expressed an inability to fathom any actions that would bring disgrace to the elderly figure. Realizing the weight of his previous concerns, Ji Yeon apologized for not thinking clearly. He acknowledged that he was well aware of Jun's character, being someone who reciprocates kindness and refrains from causing harm to others. Jun anxiously questioned his younger brother about his state, expressing concern for any discomfort or unease he might be feeling. With a troubled tone, Ji Yeon admitted that he wasn't physically uncomfortable but was longing for Jae Moon. Being considerate, Jun grasps Ji Yeon's emotions but firmly cautions him, emphasizing that impulsive actions could jeopardize both Ji Yeon and the unborn child. He expresses a sincere desire to avoid any harm to Ji Yeon's pregnancy. He's such a good brother. He'd really do anything for Ji Yeon. Ji Yeon acknowledged his older brother's words. Despite a clear understanding of their current circumstances, Ji Yeon couldn't shake off the profound sense of sadness and longing for Jae Moon. Back at the palace, the night draped itself in darkness, creating a somber and solitary atmosphere. Jae Moon, adorned in his royal blue hanbok, wandered alone within the palace grounds. His gaze was drawn to the night sky. Observing the night sky and stars in their companionable dance, he felt a twinge of envy. A wish lingered within him, yearning for a space where he and his mate could share a peaceful place to be together as well. Hwa Young-boon came up to Jae Moon and conveyed that it was too late for him to be outdoors. Jae Moon continued to gaze at the sky as he beckoned for Hwa Young-boon to approach. With a respectful bow, Hwa Young-boon neared Jae Moon, inquiring if there were any orders the prince wished him to execute. Referring to Hwa Young-boon as his brother, Jae Moon declared a newfound lack of shame. Retrieving a letter from his sleeve, he discreetly handed it to Hwa Young-boon and requested that he deliver it to Ji Yeon. With worry etched across his face, Hwa Young-boon could recognize the prince's longing, but he expressed concern that this action might be deemed reckless. He cautioned Jae Moon and emphasized that if official Kwon were to catch wind of their sneaky communication, both Ji Yeon and Jae Moon might face severe consequences this time. Jae Moon's expression darkened with anger as he vented his frustration. He emphasized the torment of 3 long months without being able to send a single letter to his beloved. He revealed the painful necessity of distancing himself from Ji Yeon and his family until he could secure the trust of those around him. Adding to the complexity, Jae Moon even made a promise to marry official Kwon's niece as part of this intricate strategy. This old man keeps getting more despicable by the second. Jae Moon meticulously detailed the reasons why his secret letter wouldn't raise suspicion, so he pressed Hwa Young-boon once more to deliver the letter to Ji Yeon. However, Hwa Young-boon remained hesitant and uncertain about carrying out this order. In the middle of the morning, Jun gave Ji Yeon a letter adorned with a delicate blue ribbon. This means Hwan and Jun met at night. I wonder if they also had a moment together. Curious, Ji Yeon inquired about the content of the letter from Jun in response. Jun explained that it was the letter the prince wished to give him, urging Ji Yeon to go ahead and read it. Ji Yeon eagerly opened the letter, taking the moment to appreciate Jae Moon's handwriting before delving into the content. He expressed a sense of longing, noting that it had been so long since he last laid eyes on Jae Moon's handwriting. Ji Yeon began perusing the contents, with the moon now absent, the black dragon pines in the desolate sky. His sole companions are the somber clouds. He wonders about the color of the moon that enveloped him as he stirs the clouds and questions the whereabouts of the moon resembling his beloved. Jae Moon's letter poetically conveys a scene of yearning of a black dragon in the barren sky, symbolizing absence and solitude. It reflects a deep longing and a desire for connection with Ji Yeon. Overwhelmed with emotion, Ji Yeon began to cry, the ache of longing intensifying after he read the letter, leaving him to wonder if he would ever have the chance to see Jae Moon again. Ji Yeon squeezed Jae Moon's letter close to his chest as if embracing Jae Moon's love rather than just the paper. Ji Yeon pressed his lips to the paper, and all the while, tears streamed down his face. The sight of his brother being heartbroken and hurting tugged at Jeon's heart. Yet, his attention abruptly shifted as he caught unfamiliar sounds emanating from outside their home. His face assumed a serious and sharp expression as he contemplated who could be outside their house, especially since getting visitors was rare at this time. Ji Yeon, genuinely worried about the commotion, witnessed Jeon swiftly drawing his sword and throwing open the doors. Jeon shushed Ji Yeon and instructed him to swiftly pack his belongings as they needed to depart immediately. Cloaked entirely in black with only their eyes visible, the figure concealed themselves behind the bamboo, their irritation evident as the siblings displayed a quick response. Jeon was spot on. Siblings, please make a quick exit for your safety. In the open, Ji Yeon carried all they needed while repeatedly inquiring about their destination. Jeon didn't want to waste time and persistently urged his brother to follow him quietly. Ji Yeon spoke up, expressing his readiness to assist his brother for the sake of safety and emphasized the advantage of having two skilled swordsmen. Abruptly, just as Ji Yeon finished his sentence, the sound of a sharp object being unsheathed pierced the air. Before he could comprehend it, his brother swiftly passed by him with his sword in hand. Ji Yeon glanced behind him and witnessed a man in all black impaled through the chest by Jeon. With a heightened sense of seriousness, Jeon urgently requested Ji Yeon's cooperation and stressed the need for them to hurry up and leave. Taking hold of Ji Yeon's arm, Jeon forcefully pulled him along. Ji Yeon was a warrior dedicated to protecting the prince, so he struggled to comprehend how he failed to anticipate the danger. Dread coursed through Ji Yeon as he contemplated the heightened vulnerability imposed by his pregnancy, sending a shiver down his spine. Why are they being hunted? Who is still not satisfied after the whole exile of the Ji family? Is that not enough for them? And more importantly, where will Jeon and Ji Yeon go now?